Good morning, Europe. It's Tuesday, the 5th of June. Our top stories this hour. Desperate search. Families look for loved ones after Guatemala's deadly volcano and why Fuego erupted with so little warning. Plus, from the Cube, our social media news desk.
We'll show you the posts from the rescue workers on the ground leading the search for the missing and the dead.
Pressure rising. Israel's prime minister pushes Europe to pull out of an Iran deal as Tehran vows to restart uranium enrichment. And on the road, as Italy's new populist coalition faces a confidence vote, we hit the road to find out what Italians think of the political drama gripping their country. Thank you for starting your day with us. We begin in Guatemala, where a desperate search for survivors is underway after the country's deadliest volcano eruption in more than a century. At least 65 people have been killed, hundreds injured, and thousands more evacuated from their homes. President GME Morales has declared 3 days of national mourning. Our journalist Evelyn Laverick has the story.
The devastation following the most violent eruption of Guatemala's Fuego volcano in more than 4 decades. 16 hours of black smoke, gas and volcanic matter raining down on the land have left dozens of communities buried in a searing mix of mud, ash and rocks. Hundreds of people remain unaccounted for. Many are thought to have died in their homes. This police video shows a patrol car being engulfed by a huge ash cloud. Those who could fled the area. Others were evacuated. Most of the walking wounded had breathing problems. Some had fractures from flying rocks. Guatemalan President GME Morales has visited some of the victims while thanking the emergency services. The initial response had been led by volunteer firefighters when the lava began flowing down the mountainside. Around 1,400 people spent the night in makeshift shelters set up in schools and government buildings. The government has declared a state of emergency and 3 days of mourning for the victims. Fuego is one of Latin America's most active volcanoes. An eruption earlier this year sent ash nearly 2 meters into the sky, but Sunday's event was on a much greater scale. Evelyn Laverick, Euronews.
Well, there are many stories of heartbreak and devastation from the ground in Guatemala. For more on that, let's head over to Alex in the Cube, our social media news desk. Alex.
Absolutely, Tessa. Now, we're seeing a lot of posts about this eruption. Let's just bring up this video, first of all, posted on Instagram from a golf course looking on to the volcano. Just have a look at this. This was taken during that eruption. You can see the billows, the plumes of this debris. This is ash, a cloud of ash, the pyroclastic flow off this eruption. And this is what is making this eruption so deadly. It's not necessarily the lava creeping along the ground. It is these molten clouds being spewed up from the volcano. And we spoke to Amanda, a 20-year-old, who was also at that golf course. Emmanuel spoke to her, and we got this photograph showing her mother taking a picture of this huge cloud. At this stage, they were not aware, they tell us, how deadly and how dangerous this cloud would be, this pyroclastic flow. And then we can see now in the posts from rescue workers on the ground the aftermath of that cloud moving across the landscape, burying people and communities. I just wanted to point out this image here, just showing you the aerials, some of the really significant destruction. And around this area where this picture was taken, there's now a makeshift morgue that's been set up, and there's an online registry where people are desperately trying to search for their missing loved ones among the dead. It's really upsetting scenes from all of this. You can see the devastation that huge billowing cloud of material caused, and these posts from the rescue workers just show how difficult the rescue operation and the cleanup is going to be.
All right. Thank you for that, Alex, and the Cube team. Well, part of the reason the death toll is so high is that this volcano seemed to strike with so little warning. And for more on that, I'm joined by Tamsin Mather. She's a professor of earth sciences at Oxford University. Can you tell us about this type of volcano and why did it seem to erupt so suddenly?
So Fuego is a very active volcano. And so it explodes, it has frequent small explosions, so maybe up to roughly 10 an hour during some periods of its activity. So what really took people by surprise about this explosion was its sheer magnitude.
Yeah, and, we were talking about
the run out from the volcano.
Go ahead.
Yes, these these pyroclastic flows ran out much further than anyone was expecting. So the largest run out since 1974, which has really caused the problems.
Yeah, and these flows that you're talking about, these go at really high speeds. And I think this is what got surprised many of the residents.
Yes, they travel extremely quickly, faster than a vehicle can outrun them. And they're a mixture of hot rock and gas. So they can overwhelm settlements and people extremely quickly and are absolutely fatal and devastating.
You said there were small eruptions. Is there still a danger? What are you watching for next?
So, from what I understand from reading the Insivume information they're putting out, the local information they're putting out on this, it's returned to some sort of background activity. So there are still explosions going on at the volcano, and I'm sure that'll be making everyone very nervous because, again, there'll be some uncertainty about how big they are. But the expectation is that it has returned back to its background activity now. But one of the big hazards now are lahars, which are volcanic mud flows. So it's the rainy season over in Guatemala. So if we get heavy rainfall, the loose ash and other pyroclastic material from the volcano on the surface of the volcano could flow in these mud flows down the volcano, and those could be very deadly as well.
All right, thank you for that, Tamsin Mather, Professor of Earth Sciences at Oxford University. Now to Iran. It's expected to announce today that it will restart its enrichment of uranium if a nuclear deal with Europe falls apart. It comes less than a month after the U.S. pulled out of the accord and as Israel's prime minister tours Europe in an effort to persuade other world leaders to follow suit. The Iran nuclear deal saw Tehran strictly limit its uranium enrichment capacity in exchange for sanctions relief. It was hoped the restrictions would prevent Iran from developing atomic bombs. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he wants discussions to remain focused on Iran as he begins talks in France today. Our correspondent Annelise Borges is in Paris for more on the story. Annelise, Netanyahu has been talking to Germany, France and the UK, and all of them have pledged their commitment to the Iran nuclear deal. Can Netanyahu convince them otherwise?
Well, that is a very good question. This three-day Europe tour is likely to be dominated by the differences between the Israeli Prime Minister and his EU counterparts with regards to the Iran nuclear deal. Of course, today he will be meeting the biggest advocate of the JCPOA, Emmanuel Macron, who's been traveling the world, meeting foreign leaders, trying to salvage this deal. The French president says that this deal is not perfect, but it's better than no deal. But Benjamin Netanyahu believes that there's no point in fighting for an agreement with Iran now that the U.S. has pulled out of it. Take a listen to what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say in his first stop in this EU tour in Berlin on Monday.
I haven't changed my view of the JCPOA, but I think right now this is becoming a secondary question because the United States has left the deal. And I think the real question we have to confront today is what do we do about Iran's aggression?
So words of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's clearly looking for support here in Europe. He met Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, who said they actually agree with the end game. They both want to avoid Iran from developing nuclear weapons. They just don't agree on how to get there, Tessa.
Yeah, and at least let's talk about Gaza. This is the first time the two are meeting after the deadly violence in the region.
Absolutely, and this is definitely going to come up. Israel faced almost universal international condemnation following those 2 days of violence that left 59 unarmed Palestinian protesters dead. More than 2,700 people were severely injured during those 2 days of violence. France had condemned the violence. The French president is said to have called Benjamin Netanyahu to actually express his and France's opposition to the violence, but also to the move of the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Now, of course, this will come up in conversation here in Paris, but also in the UK. The UK actually called the UN to launch an investigation into just why that volume of live ammunition was used against protesters, unarmed protesters in Gaza those 2 days.
All right, thank you for that. Annelise Borges keeping an eye on those talks. Thanks. Well, Vladimir Putin will also try to use his powers of persuasion today. The Russian president is in Austria. This is Putin's first state visit since he was inaugurated as president last month. It's also his first visit to Western Europe since a nerve agent attack in the UK led to the expulsion of over 100 Russian diplomats from a number of European nations. Russia has denied any involvement. Now, Putin is expected to raise the issue of EU sanctions related to Russia's support of pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. The White House says powerful sanctions remain in place on North Korea ahead of next week's summit between President Trump and leader Kim Jong-un. The comments come just days after President Trump said he no longer wants to use the term maximum pressure to describe the American response to the country's nuclear program. The White House says sanctions will remain until denuclearization is complete. Well, MPs in the UK are to hold an emergency debate over reforming abortion laws in Northern Ireland today. It follows last month's landslide vote in the Irish Republic to liberalise its own laws. Our correspondent Vincent McAviney is in Westminster for us. Vincent, what is expected to come out of the debate today?
Good morning, Tessa. Well, late last night, a group of MPs from all parties and some government ministers secured this debate today in the House of Commons. It'll last for around 3 hours and it'll have a non-binding vote at the end, but it's expected to give us a clear indication for the levels of support there are for changing the law in Northern Ireland. Now, you may remember last week I was over there and we saw protests in the streets, people demanding that the almost total ban is repealed after that vote in the Republic of Ireland. But you get into problems when it comes to how to do that. The Assembly in Northern Ireland is suspended at the moment. Westminster does have the power to change the law there. They're actually looking to take the entire law of abortion out of the criminal law across the UK and therefore in Northern Ireland as well. So they may try to argue they're changing all of the law. But the DUP, the biggest party in Northern Ireland, will be strongly opposed to making the change here from Westminster.
All right, thank you for that, Vincent McAviney, live in London. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, we begin a road trip in Italy to get all views across the country and the political drama and uncertainty. Plus, from the Cube, our social media news desk.
The shocking moment, a man poses for a selfie in front of a very disturbing accident. We'll have that for you in the Cube. But first, let's have a look at your weather.
You're watching Good Morning Europe, a recap of our top story. Desperate families hoping to find their loved ones alive are searching through debris and ash in Guatemala. At least 65 people have died after the Fuego volcano erupted on Sunday. Now, there is a selfie that is the growing source of outrage in Italy. Alex in the Cube has more about this story. Alex, what is this?
Absolutely, Tessa, and it's gone beyond Italy, globally, in fact. So here in the Cube, our social media news desk, the team have been across all the things that people are talking about. And this morning, Gosha on our team has been looking into an image that has been circulating for a few days, but there's no sign of it going away. And that image is this. It shows a man posing for a selfie in front of a woman being attended by paramedics. Now, you see on the camera here, we can probably just have a look. People believe that this man here with his face blanked, wearing shorts, taking this selfie, is making the victory symbol with his fingers. People identifying that as particularly offensive about this image. And in the background, we can see this woman who was later identified as a woman in her 80s from Canada, who was a tourist, who was struck by a train. Here she's being attended by paramedics. She later had to have her leg amputated. This image was taken by a local photojournalist, just capturing the scene of this man posing for a selfie in front of this accident. And obviously the newspaper headlines didn't pull any punches. Here, for example, they described this as nothing short of an act of barbarism. This man here posing in front of this horrible accident. Some other posts from social media we were seeing, this man from who's at Even Stephen here, says he himself is a voluntary first responder and he has seen similar scenes to this where people pose in front of accidents, and it's really questioning, he says here, what has society come to? And that is the debate that has been sparked by this image. Yes, it's upsetting, but the reason it is going on and on are people are saying, what won't people pause and take a photo in front of these days? Very upsetting scenes. People are still talking about it. We'd like to know your thoughts on this and anything we're talking about using #TheCube. You can let us know.
Wow, I understand why that went viral. Thanks, Alex. Now, 3 days after being sworn in, Italy's new populist coalition faces its first test in parliament today. The Senate and the lower house must approve the alliance between the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement and the far-right League Party. But as the parties hold a majority in both houses, the confidence vote is expected to pass. It's a time of historic change in Italy that could have far-reaching consequences, not only for the country, but for Europe as a whole. And to understand how we got here, our correspondents Brian Carter and Elena Cavallone have begun a week-long road trip. Well, they begin their journey in the south of Italy to get all voices and all views of why Italians voted the way they did and what they think about their new government.
My colleague Elena Cavallone and I just landed in Naples only 3 days after the new Italian government was sworn in. The government made up of the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement and the far-right League. This is the first stop on our 5-day journey throughout Italy. We'll go from south to north to meet Italians from all walks of life, to understand whether their hopes, whether their fears. This government has been called the first populist government in Europe, so it's a watershed moment for the European Union. You now have one of its founding members that is led by 2 Eurosceptic parties, so there's no better time for us to embark on this journey to understand how Italy got here and where it's going next. So where are we going now?
We are heading to the Spanish neighborhood in the center of Naples. It's a reality characterized by poverty, unemployment, and small criminality. It's a neighborhood where the Five-Star Movement gained more than 50% of the votes. It's really the stronghold of Five-Star Movement, and institutions are felt very, very distant. But Naples is also a city where private society is very active. That's why we're going to meet this private foundation, which gives opportunity to youngsters, trainings, and gives a perspective for a future.
We believe the state should be more present in these neighborhoods. That's why we wanted to start and give life to an experiment of community welfare, and it's been very successful.
The change will arrive, but now it's too early. Italy needs time. It can't face a revolution right now.
I think Di Maio will do something because he's a young man and he knows what he wants. He gives back some of his income, unlike the others. I would bet on Di Maio.
I hope they'll do something good on a national level, but we'll never be able to go against the European agreements because nothing will move. The only thing we have left is the hope for a better future, at least for us who are young, because there are no jobs. I believe that austerity policies in recent decades, and also the neoliberalism that has been adopted by many European countries, in the end have left cities in which the rights have been progressively decreasing. Cities in which the commitment of the state has diminished.
And Brian and Elena will continue their road trip throughout Italy throughout the week. Now, still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, an awkward interview with the former U.S. President Bill Clinton as he was asked about his past relationship with Monica Lewinsky in light of the Me Too movement. But first, your weather. Welcome back to Good Morning Europe. Now, former U.S. President Bill Clinton has said he was, quote, hot under the collar after a controversial interview where he said he doesn't believe he owes Monica Lewinsky an apology in light of the Me Too movement. Speaking ahead of an event in New York City, Clinton said he had actually apologized to Ms. Lewinsky. NBC's Craig Melvin has the interview.
Looking back on what happened then, through the lens of Me Too now, do you think differently or feel more responsibility?
No, I felt terrible then, and I came to grips with it.
Did you ever apologize to her?
No, yes. You are giving one side and omitting facts.
Mr. President, I'm not trying to present a side.
You asked me if I agreed. The answer is no, I don't.
And I asked if you'd ever apologized, and you said you had.
I have.
You've apologized to her.
I apologize to everybody in the world.
It is important to me that everybody who has been hurt know that the sorrow I feel is genuine. First and most important, my family. Also, my friends, my staff, my cabinet, Monica Lewinsky and her family.
But you didn't apologize to her.
I have not talked to her.
Do you feel like you owe her an apology?
No, I do. I do not. I have never talked to her. But I did say publicly on more than one occasion that I was sorry. That's very different. The apology was public.
That public apology did not take the spotlight off Monica Lewinsky, who tweeted today, "Grateful to the myriad people who have helped me evolve and gain perspective in the past 20 years. And you don't think a private apology is owed?
I think this thing it's 20 years ago. Come on, let's talk about JFK. Let's talk about, LBJ. Stop already.
I don't think you think President Kennedy should have resigned? Do you believe President Johnson should have resigned? Someone should ask you these questions because of the way you formulate the questions. I dealt with it 20 years ago plus, and the American people, 2/3 of them stayed with me. And I've tried to do a good job since then with my life and with my work. That's all I have to say to you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. This morning, we'll leave you with today's No Comment from Guatemala.